Welcome to Final Fights, brought to you by Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is a man who does not know how to slip a jab. It's Chris Kelly.
Hey, everybody.
All right, so Chris Kelly, you joined us for the episode where we talked about Apollo versus Rocky in Rocky 1. Now we're talking about their rematch in Rocky 2. And what most stuck out to me in this fight is that when round one starts, Rocky gets hit 6 times in a row, lands a punch. Then Apollo lands 27 punches in a row. Then he lands 14 in a row. Then Rocky gets 4 punches. And then Apollo has a 13 straight combo, like a 13 straight run. And then a 10 punch connected straight run. You know, I know that Rocky he's fighting right-handed, not southpaw, to protect his retina. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, like, I guess you're putting your other retina out there to be destroyed by Apollo. But it almost seems like a regression in boxing. Does like in this first round, or what do you think about the first round in this rematch between Apollo and also Carl Weathers put on some muscle for this movie. Jeez Louise, he's jacked. But
I liked how there's a noticeable difference between Rocky 1 and Rocky 2 with Carl Weathers' character. You could tell that he was taking it way more seriously as opposed to, because as we learned from watching Rocky, that he just thinks it's a joke. You know, he has that line where he says, well, you know, you're Italian, right? He goes, yeah. And they go, what does that mean? What does that have to do with anything? He goes, well, if you can't fight, you know he can cook. So you could tell that in the second one, he's like, where's the chump? I'm going to take him out. Where you at, man? You didn't win nothing. Get up out of these chairs. I'll kick your ass right now. And it's like, you could tell he's taking it way more seriously because he almost lost to a guy that was quite literally just a street boxer.
I think the narrative, too, about this. So in the first one, Rocky does a lot of training, and then he goes up against a guy that isn't taking him seriously, and he overperforms. Mm. In this one, you have Apollo, who may not have... I mean, as a technical boxer with form, he's much more advanced than Rocky is, but he's fueled by anger in this. And when he's working his jab, when he's moving, he's taken Rocky down easily. But he just gets so angry about it. He doesn't want to be the guy that can't beat this guy, knock him out 2 fights in a row. So I think it's an interesting narrative as to how Rocky is able to win in the 15th round. Because, I mean, Apollo has the fight. He has several 10-8 rounds. I mean, he's landed about 70,000 punches. So I don't know if you like the different narrative of this fight. I thought they did a good job in its existence. This fight exists for a reason, and that reason, the narrative behind it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. You could tell that Apollo felt like he looked like a fool in the first Rocky, so he wants to challenge him to the next fight, and Rocky accepts, even though he does say a few times that he's officially retired.
And he does retire, and he has a kid, and he doesn't have any much training in this one either. So I think it's pretty interesting that, he quits for a while, and then Adrian has a kid, and then he stays with her, and then she gives him his blessing to go fight, and he has a very truncated... I mean, he's in good shape to go 15 rounds with Apollo Creed.
That's a serious shape. He also, he can finally catch the chicken.
What would be more successful if you bought so there's a slab of concrete in front of you, and someone either gives you a sledgehammer or Rocky's head? Which one do you think breaks the concrete easier?
Oh, that's a good one. The concrete I think would break easier than Rocky's head. He is taking a beating. I mean, it's quite literally that scene. You ever watch the most brutal boxing ever? The YouTube clip. It's those 2 guys that just link arms and they just pummeling each other in the face for a solid minute, and you could literally see their faces swelling up as they're hitting each other. That's sort of what this boxing match reminded me of.
Yeah, it's really
these 2 titans whipping the tar out of each other.
I guess all right. So he's definitely set himself back because he's not southpaw, and he eventually goes southpaw in the final round, which is a good tactical move. But I just think he's like, I'm trying to protect my retina, but I'm gonna get hit more in this fight by a guy that's more determined. It's an interesting game plan, but there are boxers like this. I mean, there are people who have to take a few to give one. So I kind of dig that. And also, since we just recently talked about the fight in Rocky, the production value of this fight, geez Louise, it went through the roof.
Oh yeah, they definitely got way more money to do this movie, and you could tell that they changed up a lot of things as compared to the first fight in Rocky. You can definitely tell there's more extras. You can tell the camera angles are completely different. There's way more moving around. I read that Sylvester Stallone was actually the fight choreographer on this movie, and they choreographed the last boxing scene for several months prior to shooting it. So they had a lot of money to spend on that. Also, the boxing tech advisor, one of them was Al Silvani, who plays Cutman in this.
Nice.
He was the tech supervisor on Rocky 1 and 2. The fight and training supervisors were John Watson and Penn Densham, and they really, really put into this. And you could tell that there's a lot more, how to put it, like more aggression into it. Yeah. Specifically, whenever Apollo quite literally grabs Rocky and throws him in the corner. Mm-hmm. He's like pounds him again, and Rocky does that again to Apollo, grabbing him and throwing him into the corner. It's like, wham, 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 and then Apollo misses, and then he gets out of the way, and so on and so on.
We were talking about this before the pod, and you and your brother basically knows this fight by heart. He knows all the lines, He knows all that. But I'm watching this fight, and at the end, when he's just screaming at him, when he's like, keep go, like stop, like. Hit, stick and move, 1, 2, 1, 2, stick and move. And at the end of the fight, I'm rooting for Apollo. I'm like, Apollo, just get over yourself. Like, you're winning this. You're better. Stick and move. And I do like when he does throw the 1-2s. Like, there's a scene where he throws 3 1-2s in a row. And I'm sure most people know what that is, but I guess he throws a jab with his left hand, and then he comes in with a straight right. I mean, he's
whipping him, and he's like, get your cameras ready. Bam! Yeah. I love that. I mean, he's showboating with him and showing that he could beat him. And but as we know, that eventually after beating Rocky, hitting him so many times, I mean, he eventually tires himself out.
Yeah, and I think they do a service towards Carl Weathers in that in the first fight they made sure to let you know that he didn't train as hard as he should have, and he took it for granted, and that's what led to the knockdown in the first round. He had never been knocked down. And then the second one, he was fighting angry. He was much like Nick Cage in Drive Angry, but not a devil that escaped from hell and is fighting demons.
It was like Drive Angry, but without the car.
Exactly. He's fighting angry, and he's not listening. And I think his ego got the better of him. So I think even though Carl Weathers loses in the second fight, the narrative around it, does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. The narrative around it is a lot better, or a lot more meaningful. Mm-hmm. And he's fighting angry against Stallone, and Stallone is just kind of like, he wants to fight him too, but it's almost like he doesn't have anything to prove.
Yeah, he's just there to make money because he spends his money terribly.
Yeah, he buys watches, he bought a car, that jacket, a new hat.
Oh, Sylvester.
He winds up giving the car to Paulie anyways. Yeah. I think is one of the interesting lines in the fight scene is Mickey says to him, "You're getting killed out there," and Rocky says, "It's my life."
Yeah,
it's a great line to sum up that whole moment, because he's like, "You don't need to do this."
Yeah,
but
I thought before the 15th round though, he's like, "I'm gonna call it." Like, come on.
Yeah.
I guess a good cut man has to look out for his fighter.
Of course, yeah, he doesn't want him to die.
But it's interesting how the entire movie is about him. He has this detached retina. He just had a kid, and he doesn't want to do it. But then he gets back in the boxing round and gets hit 7,000 times. He's like, "It's my life."
Yeah, like mind your business. It's like, dude, you could really be severely injured for life. What I thought was interesting was that this movie was supposed to be set up for a sequel. I mean, it was set up for a sequel, but it was set up for a whole nother sequel. Like the original was not supposed to have this epic boxing scene in it. It was actually supposed to be Rocky was supposed to become the mayor of Philadelphia, and then he was supposed to be involved in a scandal with Paulie stealing from the treasury, and then Rocky covers for him, and they wind up with losing everything that they had. And then the ending of Rocky 3 was supposed to be them basically being back to where they were originally.
I am so happy that didn't happen.
So am I. Also, another ending, which was originally written out but not used, was that Rocky calls it in the middle of the boxing match because he thinks that it's all a big joke against him. Because there's different things leading up to the movie leading up to the fight that kind of suggest that this could possibly just be a joke against him. If you notice specifically with the scenes where Rocky is doing the Beast cologne and the director is more or less making fun of him because he can't read. And, there's different lines of dialogue where people are talking to him and refer to him as kind of being like an imbecile. And he's like, I'm not stupid. I realize that I'm not the smartest person on the planet, but I'm not stupid. And there's different things that are leading up to that. And it's almost written as Apollo is doing this as like a show. And it was supposed to be like almost halfway through the fight, Rocky was going to call it and be like, I know that you're making fun of me. I'm not stupid. I'm not an animal. I'm a human being type of thing. And it's like, oh, thank God they didn't do that. That would have been horrific in my opinion.
Yeah. Now, going back to the fight here, it's pretty interesting that Apollo hasn't really learned his lesson from the first film, and he gets hit in the body a lot, and he allows himself to be cornered. Do you think that's from his anger in trying to knock out Rocky?
But I think so, yeah, definitely.
He seems to have thrown out all of his game plan, I guess, to get this victory, and it's left his ribs open.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of rib shots. I mean, he's like turning him into mashed potatoes. And it's just like, did you not learn your lesson from before? You kept leaving your side open and, Rocky's going to hit your ribs. But, he didn't seem to learn it because it seemed like, as we discussed earlier, he's fueled by anger. So he wants to get this over with as fast as possible. That's why he's going in at him so hard and so fast right off the bat. And it's
he predicted a second round knockout or in the first 2 rounds.
Yes, he predicts that on Thanksgiving Day.
And it's amazing that the amount of effort that he put into those first few rounds that he still has a gas tank through 15 rounds.
I'm really surprised. What I thought was interesting was that one of the scenes I noticed that at 1 hour and 49 minutes and 6 seconds, in the movie, Rocky gets hit and his mouthpiece goes flying out. If you watch it again.
Oh, so he actually gets probably jacked.
Yeah, there's actually another interesting thing was after the bell rings for the end of the second round, Stallone and Rocky and Apollo seem to be really pushing and shoving and taunting at each other. Yeah. But that's because they really were, because they were really getting fed up with one another because they choreographed this boxing match for literally months so that it would look perfect. As we all know from working in film, that things are, specifically fight scenes, are choreographed to the way that it's almost like a dance. So that no one actually gets hurt. But Stallone really wanted to get hit a few times to make it look authentic, which is not crazy to think about. But it was almost like Stallone and Carl Weathers were physically hitting each other multiple times. And this was really getting on each other's nerves, because if you hit somebody, you pop them once and it's like, okay, I get it. You hit him again, it's like, okay, man, knock it off. You hit it like 3 times and you're like, okay, we got to do multiple takes of this.
Yeah.
Calm it down. So then the scene where he hits him right before the bell rings, Carl Weathers, you can see, they're dropping character. And I even said this to my brother when we were watching it, because he's like, that looks like an actual argument. I was like, it was. Yep. So you can see, if you remember, we talked about this on the other final fight with Rocky. Whenever Apollo goes boop, hits Rocky in the nose. He does that sort of again in Rocky 2, but he doesn't hit him in the nose. He shoves him in the back of the head, like, knock it off. Wow. It's a really fun little scene if you watch it from that perspective.
He also pulls Rocky's head down in one scene. I'm like, that's illegal. He's uppercutting him while holding his head.
Oh, yeah, is such a... Ugh.
And Rocky he's doing a lot of dirty clinching in this. I mean, Rocky doesn't throw jabs. That's the thing. Like, he gets in there and just throws hooks and basically roundhouse punches. So he can't really set up with a jab to get in, and plus he doesn't have a reach. So his clinching was even dirtier in this movie. And I like that after the bell rang, they were still going at it, which forced the corner to jump in. I mean, this basically set up a pretty cool and very, not animalistic, but very, what's the word?
Aggressive. It's more
very aggressive. Yeah. The first one was more respect. It was more Apollo going, what is happening? And then this one is more just kind of anger at each other. But I think it plays well.
Yeah, it gets you more involved, at least in my opinion. I grew up watching the Rocky films. I know them all by heart, as well as my whole family does. But when I watched this movie again, I found myself more getting into it. The music is especially